In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and merciful, I welcome you all in our today's session. Today we are going to talk about global and international issues related to strategic management. And this is going to be our last chapter of our textbook written by Frida David. The chapter objectives are: number one, explain the advantages and disadvantages of the entering global markets. Number two, discuss protectionism as it impacts the world economy. Number three, explain why and when a firm or industry may need to become more or less global in nature to compete. Number four, we'll be talking about discussion related to the global challenge facing American firms. And we'll be talking about some of the examples related to other parts of the world as well. Then number five, compare and contrast business culture in the United States with many other countries. Number six, describe how management style varies globally. Number seven, discuss communication differences across countries. Number eight, discuss Africa as the newest hotspot for business entry. Along with that, we'll be also discussing and talking about some of the other underdeveloped countries as well. Now, as I told you, this is the last chapter of our textbook. We are looking at a comprehensive strategic management model. We started our discussion from developing mission and vision statement. Afterwards, we did our external audit in which we tried to find out our opportunities and threats. Then we did our internal audit in which we tried to find out our strengths and weaknesses, which completed our SWOT analysis. Then in chapter number 5, we discussed long-term objectives. In chapter number 6, we generated, evaluated, and selected strategies. Then in chapter number 7 and 8, we discussed implementation of strategies and the issues related to management, marketing, finance, accounting, research and development, and MIS. Afterwards, we discussed the performance issues related to strategy implementation, and we talked about strategy evaluation. Once the strategy is being evaluated, from there, the feedback would be going backward. And we'll be talking about re-energizing or re-engineering. In chapter number 10, we discussed business ethics, social responsibility, and environmental sustainability. And now we are talking about chapter number 11, which is going to talk about global and international issues. To start our discussion, let's once again look at the realities of the 21st century. From the very start of the 21st century, we witnessed that there was collapse of new economies, the dot-com bubble burst, the TMT recession, which was related to the technology, media, and telecom. Then corporate scandals evolved. Then the incident of September 11, 2001, international competition intensified, decline of multilateralism, market instabilities, fear of diseases, fragility of natural environment. These are all the issues which started popping up from the very start of the 21st century. And now sitting in 2020, we have witnessed a major problem, a major challenge for the humanity in the form of the pandemic, the current circumstances, which has shaken the whole world, which has put many new challenges for the businesses. There is socio-cultural unrest. There is environmental uncertainty. Many new complexities have evolved. So these are all the realities we have to face in the 21st century. When we are looking at global and international issues, the underpinnings of strategic management hinge on managers gaining an understanding of competitors, markets, prices, suppliers, distributors, governments, creditors, shareholders, and customers worldwide. And the price and quality of a firm's products and services must be competitive on a worldwide basis, not just on a local basis. Because it is said that it is not you who would choose to become global. The market would force your hand to such scenarios. And this is something which we cannot avoid nowadays. Looking at the 5 largest by revenue companies in 9 countries, the analysis is done back in 2011. And the companies we are looking at are BP, HSBC Holdings, Lloyds Banking Group, Aviva, Royal Bank of Scotland, all belonging to Britain. Then Indian Oil, Reliance Industries, State Bank of India, Bharat Petroleum, Hindustan Petroleum. These are all belonging to India. In Japan, we can talk about Toyota Motors, Japan Post Holdings, Nippon, Tally G and Tally P, Hitachi, Honda Motors. In China, Sinopec, State Grid, China National Petroleum. And likewise, in Brazil, we have Petrobras and other companies. In Australia, we have BHP Billiton. In USA, we can talk about Walmart. In Canada, there is Manulife Financial. In Germany, Volkswagen, and likewise other companies are listed over here. So these are all the companies which are taken up as the largest companies back in the year 2011. And sometimes these companies gain such a volume that even the country economies are smaller than the revenues of such companies. As in this particular list, I'm quoting the world's top 100 economies. And when we talk about world's top 100 economies, we can see that there are 31 countries and there are 69 corporations. And some of the corporations I have just talked about in my previous slide. And we can see on the 10th number that country versus corporations, when we talk about revenues, the Walmart is there. Then State Grid, China National Petroleum, Sinopec Group, and likewise we can see many of the companies we have just talked about. And from here we can develop our estimate that how large these businesses are, how complex these situations can be, and how vigilant we need to be when we talk about such companies which are even larger than different economies of different countries. And we can also understand that strategic aspects holds a very high importance in developing such ventures. And there should be a clarity and consistency in the working patterns of such companies, because unless and until things are synchronized and patronized, things are not synchronized and patronized, these companies would not have been able to gain such volumes. When we look at the list of Fortune's most and least admired companies in the world for global competitiveness, we can see that most admired would include McDonald's, Google, Nestle, Nike, Yum Brands, Walt Disney, Colgate-Palmolive. And when we talk about least admired, it can be Asahi Breweries, Kirin Holdings, Winn-Dixie Stores, and likewise, there are some companies which have not been able to gain much repute. So what has made the companies most admired and what was lacking in the companies which are least admired? The only difference we can sort out would be the difference starting from their mission and vision. And then correspondingly, their strategy formulation, their strategy implementation, their evaluation and controls. These are all the aspects which would make the difference. Now, looking at multinational organizations, remember that organizations that conduct businesses across national borders, they are known as multinational corporations. And supposedly, if they are operating in more than 50 countries, they can also be known as global companies. When you are operating in such huge volumes across the borders, there are many risks of multinational organizations. For example, they may have to face expropriation of assets. There might be currency losses through exchange rate fluctuations. There can be social and political disturbances. There can be import-export restrictions. There can be issues related with tariffs and trade barriers. There can be certain embargoes, and even they have to face sometimes quotas, trade restrictions. Now, looking at the advantages of international operations, remember that firms can gain new customers for their products. The foreign operations can absorb excess capacity, reduce unit costs, and spread economic risks over a wider number of markets. And foreign operations can allow firms to establish low-cost production facilities in locations close to raw materials and or cheap labor. There are further advantages of international operations, like competitors in foreign markets may not exist, or competition may be less intense than in domestic markets. Foreign operations may result in reduced tariffs, low taxes, and favorable political treatment. And joint ventures can enable firms to learn the technology, culture, and business practices of other people and to make contacts with potential customers, suppliers, creditors, and distributors in foreign countries. Looking at some more advantages of international operations, like economies of scale can be achieved from operation in global rather than solely domestic markets. And the eighth advantage we are looking at in case of international operations is that a firm's power and prestige in domestic markets may be significantly enhanced if the firm competes globally. At the same time, there are different disadvantages of going international as well. For example, foreign operations could be seized by nationalistic factions. Firms confront different social, cultural, demographic, environmental, political, governmental, legal, technological, economic, and comparative forces when doing business internationally. and weaknesses of competitors in foreign lands are often overestimated and strengths are often underestimated. There can be issues related with language, culture, and value systems, which may differ among countries, which can create barriers to communication and problems managing people. The fifth disadvantage can be gaining an understanding of regional organizations is often required in doing business internationally, and dealing with two or more monetary systems can complicate international business operations. So when we talk about global challenges, starting from the discussion related to America, it is said that America's economy is becoming much less American. A world economy and monetary system are emerging, and markets are shifting rapidly, and in many cases converging in tastes, trends, and prices. These are the major challenges of global markets. When we talk about globalization, it is a process of doing business worldwide. So strategic decisions are made based on global profitability of the firm rather than just domestic considerations. And looking at the global strategy, it includes designing, producing, and marketing products with global needs in mind instead of considering individual countries alone. And later we'll be talking about multinational, multi-domestic, transnational strategies as well in relation with the global strategy. And the global strategy would also integrate actions against competitors into a worldwide plan. Now, moving across the borders, we have to face different cultural issues, and there are different cultural pitfalls that may help you be a better manager. These are some of the very interesting observations we are going to discuss in cultural pitfalls. For example, waving is a serious insult in Greece and Nigeria, particularly if the hand is near someone's face. Making a goodbye wave in Europe can mean no, but it means come here in Peru. In China, last names are written first. A man named Carlos Lopez Garcia should be addressed as Mr. Lopez in Latin America, but as Mr. Garcia in Brazil. Breakfast meetings are considered uncivilized in most foreign countries. Latin Americans are on average 20 minutes late to business appointments. Direct eye contact is impolite in Japan. Don't cross your legs in any Arab or many Asian countries. It's rude to show the sole of your shoe. In Brazil, touching your thumb and first finger, which means in America, it's okay sign and is equivalent to raising your middle finger, which is disgusting and humiliating. And nodding or tossing your head back in southern Italy, Malta, Greece, and Tunisia means no. And in India, this body motion means yes. Snapping your fingers is vulgar in France and Belgium. Folding your arms across your chest is a sign of annoyance in Finland. In China, leave some food on your plate to show that your host was so generous that you couldn't finish. Do not eat with your left hand when dining with clients from Malaysia or India. One form of communication works the same worldwide, and it's the smile. So take that along wherever you go. Now, Talking about these observations across different countries, we can see that there is a big contrast in between the cultures of different countries and the people when operating in global environment, people who are dealing with multinational businesses, they must be aware about the cultural sensitivities so that their client, their suppliers, their other stakeholders should not be annoyed and they would be able to operate comfortably with smooth business progress. Now, cultural differences between United States and other foreign managers are discussed in this particular slide. It is said that Americans place an exceptionally high priority on time, viewing time as an asset, and many foreigners place more worth on relationships. Likewise, personal touching and distance norms differ around the world. Americans generally stand about 3 feet from each other when carrying on business conversations, but Arabs and Africans stand about 1 foot apart. Family roles and relationships vary in different countries, and we should be sensitive about these things. Business and daily life in some societies are governed by religious factors. Time spent with family and the quality of relationships are more important in some cultures than the personal achievement and accomplishments espoused by the traditional US manager. We should always remember that many cultures around the world value modesty, team spirit, collectivity, and patience much more than competitiveness and individualism, which are so important in the United States. And remember that punctuality is a valued personal trait when conducting business in the United States, but it is not reversed in many of the world's societies. So by putting these points and examples, the major emphasis is on the fact that one must be very much sensitive about the cultural differences, and one must be able to appreciate the cultural sensitivities when moving across the borders. To prevent social blunders when meeting with managers from other lands, one must learn and respect the rules of etiquette of others. And Americans often do business with individuals they do not know, unlike business persons in many other countries and in many other cultures. So there are different communication differences across countries as well. For example, Italians, Germans, and French generally do not soften up executives with praise before they criticize, whereas Americans do soften up folks, and this practice means manipulative to Europeans. Israelis are accustomed to fast-paced meetings and have little patience for American informality and small talk. Talking about communication differences across countries, British executives often complain that American executives chatter too much. Informality, egalitarianism, and spontaneity from Americans in business meetings jolt many foreigners. Europeans feel they are being treated like children when asked to wear name tags by Americans. And executives in India are used to interrupting one another. Moving towards more Asian perspective, when negotiating orally with Malaysian or Japanese executives, it is appropriate to allow periodically for a time of silence and refrain from asking foreign managers questions such as, how was your weekend? That is intrusive to foreigners who tend to regard their business and private lives as totally separate. Looking at Mexico business culture, employers seek workers who are agreeable, respectful, and obedient, rather than innovative, creative, and independent. Mexican employers are paternalistic, providing workers with more than a paycheck, but in return they expect allegiance. Mexicans do not feel compelled to follow rules that are not associated with a particular person in authority they work for or know well. And Mexicans are very status conscious, so business titles and rank are important. Whereas when we talk about Japan-based businesses, the Japanese place great importance on group loyalty and consensus, a concept in their terms known as wa. When confronted with disturbing questions or opinions, Japanese managers tend to remain silent. Most Japanese managers are reserved, quiet, distant, and introspective, whereas most US managers are talkative, insensitive, impulsive, direct, and individual-oriented. And unlike Americans, Japanese prefer to do business on the basis of personal relationships rather than impersonally speaking over the phone or by written correspondence. Looking at Brazil business culture, it is recommended to avoid embarrassing a Brazilian by criticizing an individual publicly. That causes that person to lose face with all others at a business meeting. Appointments are commonly cancelled or changed at the last minute in Brazil, so do not be surprised or get upset. Moving towards Germany, the Germany business culture is again different from the other countries. Like Germans are like Americans in that they do not need a personal relationship to do business. They are more interested in a business person's academic credentials and their company's credentials. And German meetings adhere to strict agendas, including starting and ending times. Let's talk about Egypt business culture. Egyptians prefer to do business with those they know and respect, so expect to spend time cultivating a personal relationship before business is conducted. And in Egypt, business moves at a slow pace and society is extremely bureaucratic. Again, moving towards China-based cultural perspectives, the Chinese rarely do business with companies or people they do not know. Your position on an organizational chart is extremely important in business relationships. Arriving late to a meeting is an insult and could negatively affect your relationship. Meetings require patience because mobile phones ring frequently and conversations tend to be boisterous. Looking at Indian business culture, people in India do not like to say no verbally or non-verbally. Rather than disappointing you, they often will say something is not available or will offer you the response that they think you want to hear or will be vague with you. Looking more at India business culture, Indians prefer to do business with those whom they have established a relationship built upon mutual trust and respect. Punctuality is important, and Indians generally do not trust the legal system and someone's word is often sufficient to reach an agreement. Now, we are looking at sampling of Asian countries with ease of doing business rankings. For example, the countries, the economies we are looking at are Singapore, which in case of ease of doing business among all countries is 1 out of 183. South Korea, that is 16 out of 183 countries of the world. Japan, that is 18 out of 183. Thailand, 19. Malaysia, 21. Taiwan, 33. China, 79. Pakistan is at 83. Indonesia, 121. Russia, 123. India, 134. Philippines, 148. So these are the rankings of different Asian countries. When we look at the ranking of African countries in relation with ease of doing business rankings, we can see that South Africa is at 34, Tunisia is at 55, Ghana 67, Egypt 94, Kenya 98, Ethiopia 104, Morocco 114, Uganda 122, and likewise the other countries are also listed. When we talk about European countries and we look at ease of doing business rankings, the United Kingdom is at 4th number out of 183. Sweden is at 14, Germany 22, France 26, Czech Republic 63, Turkey 65, Italy 80, and whereas Ukraine is at 145. And we can also see different countries, GDP per capita, inflation rate, population in millions. And we can also develop our estimates that which countries are more feasible for us to move to when we think in terms of going international. Again, we are looking at the North and South American countries, and we are talking about ease of doing business rankings. In case of United States, that is 5 out of 183. In case of Canada, that is 7 out of 183. Mexico 35, Argentina 115, Brazil 127, Chile 43, and likewise other countries are also listed. Now we are going to talk about Porter's determinants of national advantage, and our main area of discussion would be related to home country of origin is crucial to international success. And when we talk about home country situation, there are different factors we need to focus upon. For example, in terms of a home country, the first thing we need to talk about is the factor conditions related to the basic factors, which can be land, labor. It can be advanced factors in terms of highly educated workers and digital communications. And it can be generalized factors in terms of capital, infrastructure. And in case of specialized factors, it can be skilled personnel. So looking at the Porter's determinants of national advantage, other than the factor conditions, the second thing we need to talk about is the demand condition, which is determinant of national advantage. And according to Michael Porter, home country may support scale efficient operations by itself. And in addition to demand conditions, we can talk about related and supporting industries, which are basically referring to the formation of industrial clusters. For example, Japanese cameras and copiers, Italian shoes and leather. So different countries are having their own national advantages based upon the expertise they have, the factor conditions available to them, and the demand condition prevalent over there. And the fourth factor in Porter's determinant of national advantage is known as firm strategy, structure, and rivalry. And in that regard, Michael Porter talked about intense rivalry fosters industry competition. And these are basically the four determinants of national advantage. And it is said that the home country of origin is crucial to international success, and the home country would be evaluated in terms of its factor conditions, demand conditions, related and supporting industries, and the firm strategy, structure, and rivalry. This concept is also known as Porter's diamond, which is again talking about the determinants of the national advantage. Now, when we are talking about international strategy, opportunities, and outcomes, first of all, we need to identify international opportunities. And the international opportunities can be sorted out in terms of increased market size, return on investment, economies of scale and learning curve effects, location advantage. Once these international opportunities are sorted out, then we have to look at resources and capabilities. And in case of international strategies, the international business level strategies are to be discussed: multi-domestic strategy, global strategy, transnational strategies. These are the options available to us in strategic frames. And once we have finalized our strategy according to our organizational objectives, then we have to look at the modes of entry to go abroad. And the modes of entry to go abroad would include exporting, licensing, strategic alliance, acquisition, and it can be establishment of the new subsidiaries. I'll be discussing about these modes of entry in our next slide. And once the modes of entry are decided, which are going to provide higher performance returns and innovation. But before we reach to the higher performance returns and innovation, we also need to look at management problems, risk, and the first steps. And once we have witnessed the issues, the conditions and constraints faced by the management, obviously, then we'll be looking at our optimized performance returns and the capabilities of coming up with innovation, which is going to create the strategic competitiveness for us. Now, looking at the advantages and disadvantages of different entry modes. For example, in case of exporting, the major advantage is that ability to realize location and experience curve economies, whereas disadvantage can be high transport costs, trade barriers, and problem with local marketing agents. In terms of licensing, the advantage is low development costs and risks, whereas the disadvantage can be inability to realize location and experience curve economies, inability to engage in global strategic coordination, and lack of control over technology. Looking at franchising, the advantage can be low development costs and risks, whereas disadvantage can be inability to engage in global strategic coordination, lack of control over quality. Talking about joint ventures as an option to go abroad, the advantages can be access to local partners' knowledge, shared development costs and risks, and political dependency. Whereas disadvantages can be inability to engage in global strategic coordination, inability to realize location and experience curve economies, and lack of control over technology. And when we talk about wholly owned foreign subsidiaries, the major advantage can be protection of technology, ability to engage in global strategic coordination, ability to realize location and experience curve economies. And the disadvantage can be, in case of wholly owned foreign subsidiaries, is high costs and risks. Likewise, when we talk about different strategic options, in case of international aspects, the advantages can be transfer of distinctive competencies to foreign markets, and the disadvantages can be lack of local responsiveness, inability to realize location economies, and failure to exploit experience curve effects. In case of multi-domestic aspects, which we would be talking about in our next slides, the advantages can be ability to customize product offerings and marketing in accordance with local responsiveness, and the disadvantages can be inability to realize location economies, failure to exploit experience curve effects, failure to transfer distinctive competencies to foreign markets. When we try to adopt global strategy, the advantages we can drive can be, number one, ability to exploit experience curve effects and ability to exploit location economies. And in case of global strategy, the disadvantages can be lack of local responsiveness. And we'll be left with an option which is known as transnational. And the transnational strategy would give us advantages like ability to exploit experience curve effects, ability to exploit location economies, ability to customize product offerings and marketing in accordance with local responsiveness, and reaping benefit of global learning. But even in case of transnational strategy, the disadvantages can be difficulties in implementation because of organizational problems. Now we're going to talk about business level international strategies. The first aspect we have is international low cost, which is usually located in home country, and we are engaged in exporting to international markets. Along with that, international low cost would also involve low value added operations in foreign countries and high value added operations in home country. When we talk about international differentiation, countries with advanced or specialized factor conditions most likely to use this strategy. For example, in case of Canada, Germany, Japan, and USA, they are focusing upon international differentiation. And when we think in terms of international focus strategies, technologically advanced firms follow focused low cost strategy, and focused differentiation firms compete on the basis of image and design. And third group competes on low price by imitating. And in case of international integrated low cost differentiation, remember that this option can be most effective in dealing with diverse markets and often relies upon flexible manufacturing, total quality management, or rapid communication networks. When we talk about corporate level international strategies, the type of corporate strategies selected will have an impact on the selection and implementation of the business level strategies. Some corporate level strategies provide individual country units with flexibility to choose their own strategies, whereas others dictate business level strategies from the home office and coordinate resource sharing across units. So there can be three corporate level strategies basically we're going to talk about. The first is multi-domestic strategy. The second would be global strategy. And the third one would be transnational strategy. In case of multi-domestic, which is a corporate level international strategy, the strategy and operating decisions are decentralized to strategic business units in each country. Products and services are tailored to local markets. Business units in each country are independent of each other and assumes markets differ by country or region and focus on competition in each market. These are the aspects related to multi-domestic corporate level international strategies. And another factor can be prominent strategy among European firms due to broad variety of cultures and markets in Europe. So most of the European firms, they follow multi-domestic strategic options. When we look at global strategy, the products are standardized across national markets. Decisions regarding business level strategies are centralized in home office. Strategic business units are assumed to be interdependent. The global strategy would emphasize economies of scale, and firms often lacks responsiveness to local markets, and it would require resources to be shared and coordination across borders, which also make it difficult to manage. In terms of transnational strategy, it seeks to achieve both global efficiency and local responsiveness. And another very interesting word in relation with transnational strategy is globalization. And in terms of globalization, it is said that you have to think global and act local. So just like transnational strategy is saying that seeks to achieve both global efficiency and local responsiveness. But transnational strategy is difficult to achieve because of simultaneous requirements for strong central control and coordination to achieve efficiency, as well as local flexibility and decentralization to achieve local market responsiveness. And transnational strategy must pursue organizational learning to achieve competitive advantage. So that basically concludes our discussion related to international and global perspectives. Thank you very much for joining us today.